Good day to everybody listening. My name's Dan Beck. So I am a director of an accounting firm called Power Tynan and a director of an analytics firm called PT 2.0. I actually make that distinction because it was born out of an accounting firm delivering services to our clients and other accounting firms. So we operate very heavily in the Microsoft space, so what we call the Microsoft Power Platform, which is the combination of Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate.
It's great to have you here. So, Dan, I'm gonna run you through some questions that I've just spoken to you about off air. But I mean, really, the main thing that I want to get to the bottom of here is why do you think it's so hard for firms to implement Microsoft Power BI?
Yeah, I think it's hard for people to implement Power BI because they don't fundamentally understand what it is. Okay. What a lot of people see it is as a reporting platform. And what I try and communicate and explain to people is that it's more like Excel 2.0. Okay, so it's actually an evolution of reporting platform, and just a bit like when Excel was released in 1985, somewhere around about that. It took years for it to gain prevalence and people to work out what it actually did. I think Power BI is a little bit the same. Like Power BI officially has been around for 5 years now. It has been around a little bit longer in terms of some of its functionality inside Excel. But I think that's why firms are finding it hard to implement, is they see it as a reporting platform, not as an actual evolution and extension of Excel and what they do inside Excel. So they've got a short-term view of, I want to do dashboards. Okay. Rather, what I want people to do is to say, actually think Power BI is actually reporting dashboards. That's really one component of it, but it's actually a fantastic analytical tool to actually deliver value to clients and internally around. So I think that short-term view of what Power BI is actually a lot of what makes it hard for firms to implement, because it seems like it only covers off a small part of what they want to do. I think that most people have a short or fixed viewpoint of what Power BI can do. I think they realize what it can actually do for the business. There'd actually be a lot more effort and time spent inside organizations working out that this is to be implemented properly, not just downloaded, start using, and hope for the best kind of thing.
So is what you're saying, are you saying that you think like firms are seeing Power BI as the new whiz-bang tool for reporting, and they just think they're just going to plug it in and get even better outcomes than before, rather than it should be looked at as, you're saying it should be looked at as an evolution of Excel, in the sense that you can use it to interact with it, like not just consume it. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So I think this is the thing, is I think that a lot of people use Power BI as a consumption device. And I think a lot of that has actually been borne by the different software vendors that are out there. So yeah, all our different vendors all have their own Power BI reporting packs. Okay. But the problem is that because they're locked down to a particular platform, you're not able to interact with them in terms of plugging in other bits of software, that we've become to know it as something that you just look at to get a result, rather than actually formulate an answer to. So I think that very much it's viewed by a lot of clients, by a lot of firms, as a consumption rather than a production tool. And I guess that's where we want to change people's mindset, is that I personally think that in 5 years' time, we're going to be using Power BI to do things like analyze transactions, do audits, do compilations of different items, more so than just looking at some numbers in a page. We're actually going to drill down and we're going to analyze businesses, not just consume. But to do that, we need to learn some of the tools in Power BI to be able to do that analysis. I'm not talking about necessarily designing reports. I don't think most firms need to learn how to design reports to any great extent, but I think they need to learn how to interact and understand what the data does.
So going back to the question, we're basically, like, what we're seeing is that the majority of firms are not able to implement Power BI. And are you suggesting that it's because they're not understanding how to use it properly? They're trying to just literally plug and play it. Is that what the angle that you're trying to mention here?
Correct. So spot on. I do think that we're treating it as a plug and play. I think that we implement it either internally for inside the organization, or we try and implement it for clients. If we're implementing it for clients, I think that there's a lot more potential, by the way, for implementing for clients for advisory work than there is internal. Get it that most people want to start with internal to learn. And that's cool. That's awesome. Get on that learning train. But the real value comes from using it with clients. Now, if we're using it with clients, it's not just a drag and drop. It's part of a strategy. It's part of an advisory process if we're going to use it for clients. So it's about training up people inside the organization on how to use it. It's about understanding the source of the data. It's about understanding how you're going to have a conversation with people as well. So why I think it's hard to implement something like Power BI is because it's not a plug and play. It's because it needs a strategy and a mindset around it for it to work effectively. And look, of course it can be plug and play, but I think that those who treat it as that don't get the outcomes, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is if you treat it as plug and play, then the best you're going to get is what comes out of the box. And yeah, we're advisory firms, we're knowledge workers. Very rarely do you produce the same financial statement for 10 clients. Same thing with this, is there's going to be tweaks and changes that needs to happen to somebody's business. And that's why I don't think it's plug and play, but that's why I think it's also harder to implement, is because we treat it as consumption, not production. Therefore, we don't dedicate resources to it.
Yeah. Can I touch on the client-based side and just see what your comment is on the client-based side as well? Like, do you think that you need a level of sophisticated client to deliver this type of reporting, or is that a myth?
No, I think that is an absolute myth, that you need a sophisticated or even a big client to do this in. Obviously, the bigger the client, the more time you can spend in from an advisory perspective in really drilling down to their key requirements. But if you understand the fundamental process of how Power BI and Atani can help you deliver advisory, then a business that's got a sole operator can actually be helped, because it is more about the analysis and the advisory work than the Power BI work that's actually takes part of that.
It's so common for me to have a director who looks at this and is blown away and goes, wow, this is amazing. But then they don't upskill their staff or hire resources or speak to you. And I think,
yeah, I think this comes back to the silver bullet thing that we've talked about previously. And as I've said to you, silver bullet to me always is synonymous with quick fix. Okay. Somebody wants a silver bullet because it's going to take time and effort to actually do this. So resourcing comes in many forms. Resourcing comes from either building your own knowledge, building the knowledge of a team member, or engaging someone as a third party to help you with the journey. Okay. I am a massive, massive believer that accountants are poised in this area to become Power BI experts. Okay. Especially around data advisory, because we've already got the skills that makes a good data advisor, right? All we're trying to do here is mean that you don't need to have such a propeller head to be able to operate it. Okay. So the skills that an accountant has are things like the ability to problem solve, the ability to communicate. Okay. And that's probably one of the key ones in this whole thing this is why advisor is taking so long to implement inside firms everywhere, is that we need to use that communication paradigm as much in Power BI as it is with advisory. Power BI is just another form of advisory that's data driven. So I think that we actually need to build resources in multiple areas. I think that the organizational sponsor or head actually needs to, once they see Power BI, is actually invest a little bit of time into understanding it, not learning it, understanding it. And probably one of the people that I always go and use as a practical example to this is Matt. He originally, when we started with him on a Power BI journey, Matt doesn't know how to build a report, right? Wouldn't know how to. He couldn't add a visualization to a report, but he's got a team that helps him do that. So Matt understands what his client needs, understands what needs to be delivered He knows how to communicate to the client and build that rapport and that advisory. He has got a team around him internally and externally that helps deliver solutions. So I think that what people first see is they see Power BI looks awesome. They then go and say, I want to implement this into my business. I think they miss two things. One is a strategy around how they're going to use it internally and for clients. And number two is actually building up the support mechanism around it. So like any skill, Power BI takes time to learn how to use. It then takes more time to become an expert in it. And unless you're a sole trader or a one-man band, or everyone else is just purely focused on accounting, you actually need a team around you, not to learn. Like, I'm not talking about you need a whole team of Power BI people and that's all they do. Like, you need a team of people who understand and can use Power BI to help you implement your ideas. Okay, so if we can actually start with things like templates and things like that. Templates, once again, aren't a silver bullet. They're something there to shortcut the journey. Okay, they still require implementation, they require support, they require vision, and they require an advisory skill around them.
Okay, I want to touch on why you need Atani. It's very common for me to talk to new people to Power BI, and they'll either ask me or they'll think it in their head, why do we need Atani? We'll just go straight to Microsoft Power BI without Atani.
Yeah. Cool, mate. Really, really good question. And for those listening at home, PT 2.0 actually started with Power BI long before I met Cam. Okay. And, we were on our Power BI journey. We were developing solutions. We were developing connectors. Life was good. Okay. But we didn't know life could be better. And what I mean by that is that a lot of our early clients, we were having to build everything from ground up, client by client. So we spent huge amounts of time building connectors, building other ways to bring data into a data warehouse. And because we're not a Microsoft accredited developer, we would build it in their own environments, which would mean we'd have to build it each time. Now, where we've got something like Atani, and can I say now is that probably 80 to 90% of our clients actually sit in Atani as that base platform, is there were some major key advantages to it. Number one, the cost to implement significantly reduced. The time to execute significantly reduced. The ability for someone else to manage the infrastructure, the security, everything else like that is now something that we don't need to worry about at all. And just the sheer ability to access so many different programs and applications so quickly means that you can spin up a solution in minutes as opposed to weeks or months that we have with where we build a solution without Atani. So look, we still have clients who build things independently, but what we do is that when we are talking to our clients is we give them alternatives. Here's the option with Atani, here's the option without. And I would say that probably only 1 out of 100 then go and say, let's do it without Atani, because quite literally we'd add 2 months to a project and tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do it. So that's why I'd say what Atani is it possible to do it without Atani? Absolutely. But do you want to grow old getting a solution?
Thank you, Dan. Great. That's a great answer. Could we move across to, like Matt literally said to me the other day, Cam, I wish you ran a monthly webinar with us, all the Atani users, talking to us about what's happening with pricing. They are so anxious about pricing and what others are doing and what they should be pricing. Like, it's something that interests them. Like, I never really, I wouldn't have never comprehended how much this is important, is that the pricing inside data analytics. And I'm talking, do you want to just make some comments on a few things around pricing? One is for like financial management style reporting versus operational, and then recurring and custom type work. Could you make a couple of comments around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Pricing is, and I'm not surprised you get lots of questions around pricing, because I reckon pricing in data analysis services, reporting advisory services is difficult because people aren't used to it. They don't know what value is. The problem is that for a lot of firms, we've always worked out value by time to produce, right? Now what we're talking about is okay, there is time to produce a template to upskill, things like that, but potentially the value is far greater than the input. So how am I actually going to price this thing together? And I'm just going to draw a distinction there between bespoke projects and then some of the more organized kind of delivery to clients. I'm a big believer around where we've got a template, like say a Xero template for clients that we've produced to go across the firm, is that I think that there's this tendency to try and give it away to a degree, which I'm not a massive fan. I think that there is a lot there that actually delivers consistent value. So in those kind of circumstances, I say, hey, connect your template to an advisory service and then put a price on that. Now, some firms I know that price can be, well, there's a lot of firms I know that give it away, stop it, but some go, hey, here's $50 a month for this template, or others go up to $500 a month. I think that pricing is more correlated with the advice and the conversations that you're having than recovering your investment in there. And we see that with some firms, that very much that the templates are the talking point, the value to the clients, the advisory. Okay, so use that where we've got it templatized. Where we talk then about more specific things for clients, where we're building something bespoke for a client, I think it gets a lot harder for people to try and talk about how we're going to price this. Like, I've got resources and everything else like that. There's no silver bullet for that. I think that a lot of it from our experience is coming together with the client, once again, working out the value and then working out the cost of it. More and more, we tend to move to more monthly or regular recurring type payments rather than once-off project costs. Number one, to obviously reduce that initial burden to get it across the line for the client. But I think there's also this propensity that as we start doing more of it, that we still consider it, what's the WIP cost of developing? And more as we move into this, there is less WIP that is identifiable to an individual project and more that is framework type cost. So for most of our projects, we have a look at, okay, what would be the WIP cost plus what would be the framework cost that we've got in there as well when we start talking about pricing? And then what's the value on it? Like, is it then going to be surrounded by an advisory service? So, for some firms, we sit down there and we spend a day a month where we're doing data discovery. Okay, where we're telling them what they didn't know about what they don't know and things like that. So when it comes into it, I still go and say, hey, even with the project ones, work out where that's going to sit in the organization. And especially as people move into data analysis, it's not, these things are generally not one project. Like, once we open up the box, it actually turns into, well, I'm starting here. And then I actually want the next piece, which is the challenge for most firms, I find, because what we do generally is we start with financials. Okay, it's comfortable, it's easy, it's exact. We know if we're right or not. Okay, if it doesn't balance, we're wrong. If it does, we're right. So that there's this black and white that comes in with financial analysis. However, for most businesses we deal with, that's probably only 30% of the pie that they actually want to look at. The operational type reporting is actually much more important to day-to-day operations. And people don't like me saying this, but financials are outcomes. Operational is drivers. Okay, so the more we can get into operational reporting as accountants, the actually better off we're going to be. However, it gets murkier. Like, we're not experts in operational, right? So there's this bit of this propensity to financial only. And that's what we're trying to personally change with our clients, is to actually go and say, hey, we've got a specific specialization in an industry. So let's say it's manufacturing. It's now about getting the data team to work with the accountants who specialize in an industry and start getting that knowledge out of people's heads. So one of the things that I always do, and pandemic's made this hard, but we always try and do, is, for instance, a walk around. Okay, go and visit a client, walk around, try to start understanding what's going on. Bring other members of your team with you as you go. Understand the client. Because personally, I think that to be successful long term, I think we are going to need to analyze, reconstruct, and report on operational data to a greater extent than we do financial data. Financial data is a good place to start, though. Don't get me wrong. It's a great place to learn your skills because it is exacting. Operational data, you're not going to know necessarily unless you walk the floor and understand and collate all the other data together. But to me, from running accounting firms and engineering firms and things like that, that operational data is massive, but harder to price, harder for people to understand and put a value on. And that's why I go and say, well, this is where we start with friendly clients who want an outcome, who you're going to learn with at the same time to understand an industry, but bringing in multiple members of your team. Number one, you're going to learn from them. Secondly, they're going to learn some of these tools. Thirdly, they're going to be looking for opportunities, right? So they're next in that same vertical when we go and say, well, actually, we can come up with a closing WIP figure that is segmented by product category, product group automatically, applies to a lot more customers than the one that we're currently doing pricing for. So I guess what I'm saying is involve everyone, because you'd be amazed what you can learn.
Do you see a movement here with firms going towards different niches operationally now? Because I'm just seeing a theme happening is, we're looking at Build Exact. I mean, our area is going to be built, or we're going to be doing Square and really hammer hospitality. Do you see this as the next frontier is to not just put that you niche on your website, but actually niche, like where you understand the operational drivers of a business in areas?
Yeah, I do. I think that the selection of a niche also varies with the size of the business as well. So, what we then end up with in some of our larger clients where they've got a couple of hundred staff is departments with niches. So, but I think a niche is a very powerful thing, and not just for Power BI reporting, but I think it's a powerful thing for firms as a whole as well. What Power BI at Tani can do is actually accelerate. Look at exponential growth. We're seeing more and more that firms are going into this. We got a call the other day from a firm who had 200 pubs that they want to benchmark. Okay. What better place to do that than starting to look at it inside Power BI, bringing them all together to start benchmarking. We're seeing a lot of firms not having one vertical, but maybe having two or three in there. And look, we've got a lot of generalist firms out there, and I'm not saying that generalist is bad. I just think that as we start moving to operational type reporting, having that background knowledge can be very powerful in this space. Or what firms need to do is they actually need to have a third party join on with them in the journey. So say you're targeting agricultural clients, having someone who is an expert in ag joining in to that journey as well. But then obviously that reduces flexibility to a degree at the same time. So I think we're seeing teams that are specializing in firms. And I certainly see firms that are laser focused on particular niches, especially around building, construction, hospitality. Retail seems to be the biggest areas where we just have firms that say, no, for us to be a master in this area, we need to be laser focused. But like with all firms, you're not going to turn a family group that has construction but also has another business type. You're still going to try and look after the whole client. Right. So we're not saying that everyone's only 100% dedicated to that niche, but there's this mindset, there's this prerogative to be able to focus.
The other interesting side of this that I've seen coming to fruition on this pricing side, on this value side of having data analytics inside your firm, is a fair few firms have been recently telling me, Cam, we recently won this business that is giving me 100,000 in fees, and they're talking bookkeeping and financials and tax, and then an advisory arm. But we would have never won them. We would have never got them without the data analytics side. That's why they came to us, which is there's value in itself. That's probably not being, with the WIP conversation and the fixed costs and that's actually not coming into it, but it's actually huge, is the value of winning new business.
Look, absolutely. I think that just like any kind of business is you're trying to align yourself with people who, number one, can offer you a complete service. So therefore, you're dealing with one person, one key contact point. But I think that there's also a bit of like technology is changing so rapidly across every industry out there. Knowing that you've got a partner that's actually looking at this kind of stuff, that's executing in this area. We've actually sat in with a few firms where we've actually sat with them as they've pitched to new clients to go and say, hey, we have data analytics. Now, they might not have a formal data analytics team, but they've partnered with, say, my business to then go and say, hey, actually, we want to talk to this client, and we understand that this is going to make us different to everyone else who's pitching the exact same. I'm offering you advisory to do your tax returns, your super fund, everything else like that. So I think it does offer a point of differentiation. What my concern is that firms that don't start actually embracing these services, is it's going to be a deficiency in services in years to come. That if you're not doing this kind of thing, then you'll actually take a backward step. So you'll get a negative mark, rather than at the moment, if you're doing it, you're getting a +1 against your services. So that's, I guess, why I try and encourage firms to explore this area, because we know that the larger firms are actually getting involved in this space, and it is becoming a little bit of a differentiator at the moment. But as I said before, size doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? You can be small, you can be big. And, this kind of stuff that we were doing using different tools than Power BI used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to operate. And in medium to large enterprises, this kind of analysis has been available. It's just that now we can offer it to clients at a very affordable price. The gateway, honestly, is mindset and recognizing this is a future avenue of business. Once we get past that, we're talking about using the skills you've already learned and just picking up a few data skills along the way, or enabling some of your team to have those data skills. And you're right, piggyback on the knowledge that they've acquired to service your clients. Like, I don't suggest that everyone becomes a Power BI expert.
Mm-hmm.
Just the same way as I don't say that everyone should become an Excel expert. But what I would love to do is every one of us have got that person in the office who's that Excel expert, right? Who in the moment we've got an Excel problem that just becomes too tough, we pick up the phone and say, hey, Boyd, how do I solve this problem?
Mm-hmm.
What I would love to see is that we end up with the same thing for Power BI in firms, that we've got that resident expert that sits there. And there might be multiple experts, right? Because, one of the big things that we find, and what stops people doing it, is that the skill is currently scarce. So we have people worried, well, if I lose somebody, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose this knowledge. I'm not going to be able to service the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Well, number one, unless you're a sole trader, don't teach one person. Okay. This is a journey where people can collaborate and learn together. So number one, multiple people. In fact, we run a lot of workshops around Power BI training across Australia, New Zealand. And whenever we run the workshop, we make sure that there's 2, 3, 4 people in there. They don't have to do the full course, but we actually run a session right at the beginning that is for every staff member, that talks about what it is, what it can do, what's the applicability to a client. And the reason for that is, number one, create opportunity. Number two, know that there's a new frontier that's emerging in this marketplace. As I said, if you think about it as Excel 2.0, go after it with that same kind of relish that you use Excel with, because it'll serve you down the line. But also have your key contacts around. Like, there's a number of firms, for instance, that we operate as their backup. If somebody goes and they've got a project to get delivered, me or my team step in, pick up the project where it was, and help get it finished, right? But I would prefer that you have multiple people trained, so that you keep that knowledge in-house and you keep building it. Eventually, Power BI knowledge will become ubiquitous, like Excel knowledge. Until then, like any business division, you don't have only one person in the organization that can do payroll, right? Same kind of thing. Set your team up, set set them up so that you've got multiple people being trained.
And I mean, this is like a common fear that I get from directors and partners is that they think, well, I don't know how to do it. I did a couple of little courses, but I'm not driving the Power BI engine. What if my star leaves me and I'm building up this recurring revenue stream? I'm relying on it so heavily every day goes past. What if they leave? You know, this fear that, and they're actually thinking this before they start, if they get down that journey. And so what you're saying really is that, one, have a backup like yourself to get that interim period out of trouble, but also the shit goes on, like the show goes on.
Correct.
Like if that means that you have to tell your client, look, we're not running any development over the next month. Well, that's just the way it is.
Correct. And, a bit the same if you have someone who has an accident or anything else like that. The best way to survive, in your risk register, multiple people, or know that there's resources out there that can step in, but be honest with your client and just have what your strategy is set, and you'll end up with multiple people, because it will become something. And look, the other thing is, this kind of stuff's also a bit sexy, right? It's very cool. And I think you'd be surprised at how many people actually want to learn this kind of stuff if given the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I think that what we think is we think about the person in the organization that is in IT or something like that. And if I can, for just 30 seconds, just go and say, who's the right person in an organization to do this kind of stuff? It's someone, to me, it is someone who is an intermediate to senior kind of person who wants to learn. Okay. This is not Power BI. If you want to grow as a service in your firm, is not an IT function. Okay. It's an advisory function that uses technology to achieve. So we see firms go and implement Power BI. And I'm not saying that IT shouldn't be involved. I think that every division should be involved and should learn, because there are some massive, massive advantages to IT services internally to measure and leverage if you get the IT team up to speed as well. But what I'm saying is, if you're offering a data advisory service to clients, is you need people who are able to talk, communicate, and advise clients. So I always say, hey, pick someone who's senior or intermediate, who likes technology. They don't need to know how to program. They don't need to do all of that kind of stuff. I say, hey, if there's a partner there that wants to learn it, awesome. Just know that you're never going to have the time to get into the guts of it, but learn enough so that you can help the others out into it. Even for myself, I've got a technical team now that sits around me that I don't get into Power BI as often as I used to. And some of the team actively discourage me occasionally, but I still am in there enough to know so that when it comes back to, well, Dan, how should I best present this to the client? How should I actually design this? They're the kinds of questions that I'm getting involved with, not, hey, what's the DAX to do this measure? All right. And so that's probably a pretty important thing, is every firm where we've seen the partner go and say, I'm going to do it, it never tends to leave them from the organization. So the organization doesn't leverage it. And generally it then gets stuck in providing internal services only. Where, as I said, the biggest play for this is with your clients.
Hey, this has been great so far. Thanks, Dan.
No problem.
I want to, you were talking about just earlier about that red flag, if you don't have the skills. And that's where I was thinking, like, I'm a big believer in the operational side as well, because that's going to be a huge area that you can be exposed, where like a client will say, well, this, if you're a medical practice, and so this firm gives me average patients per day, like obviously if I come over to you, you can do that. That's an immediate red flag where you can be exposed that you can't actually deliver something like a fundamental KPI, operational KPI.
Correct. And I think that what we're seeing is, let's face it, the market at the moment is still what I call immature. Hence why I get out there and talk about it. Getting out and talk about it isn't to promote my business, it's to promote what's possible. out there. And I certainly do, is that I see all the time that firms have some kind of reporting requirement that their advisor's helping them with. Suddenly going to that next advisor and, can you help me? Well, no, I can't. It poses two problems. Number one, you might not get the client to come across. Number two, if you do get the client, there's still this other party that's sitting in the background trying to win them back all the time. And I guess that's where we go to some firms and say, hey, we're the independent third party. You can do all of the other work, bring us in and help with that. But hey, why not be on the front foot and actually learn this stuff? Because it is going to become greater and greater as a requirement. Like, most business owners aren't IT people. They're not accountants. They're not even necessarily knowledge workers. So what they're doing is they're going to their advisor to say, hey, I need advice to help run my business. So I think we've got a bit of an obligation to either go and say, hey, if we want to be holistic with our clients, we need to put, a few more tools in the tool chest, or we need to find people that can help the client. And certainly that's how we've done it from our business, is taking that on. And I think that as more and more businesses pick this up, it is going to be a haves and have nots of the industry.
Hey, talk to me. I want to talk to you about the now, you already touched on it a little bit, but the future of operational reporting and financial reporting and where they intersect, but also just, you're talking about how immature we are as an industry so far. I mean, that's also correlates. Yes, we're immature with our skill set, but the industry itself is immature because of the cloud movement. I mean, that operational side, I mean, it's very difficult to help operate in operational reporting if the business isn't cloud-based to get access to the APIs. So, I mean, that in itself, I mean, what are we in Australia is 70% are on zero for the financial side, but I mean, that the percentage on operation is a lot lower than that, significantly lower, where it's very immature, where it's still growing. But as we see this transition to more businesses going cloud with all of their functionality, this is obviously going to have an impact on the industry
Massively. And look, the trend's going to continue, right? One of the biggest things that's happened over the last couple of decades is the invention of the API. Okay. Now, API, for everyone listening, is an application programming interface, which to me is short for consistent and considered data access. Okay. Essentially what's happened is that we're able to access data from data sources in a validated and consistent manner, which means that we're not just pulling information off a report that Bob produced one way this week and a different way the next week, and things like that. Even inside legacy systems, as things were customized and things like that, people changed the data tables. So suddenly the inconsistency went out the window. So that's probably the biggest thing that cloud-based services have brought together is APIs. Now, it doesn't have to be purely cloud-based to have an API. It's just that that's where it more logically fits, right? I think we are going to see, especially as the bigger vendors are producing cloud-based software, I think this will continue to change. Just about everything out there has a newer version either in the works or being released that is cloud-based. It's just a lot of businesses haven't found the reason to actually transition across. I think that by the time we start showing people with that ready access to information that what is possible, I think that maturity in the market will actually improve considerably. And like, there's always, whenever we make a decision, there's pros and cons, there's ROIs, there's everything else like that. But I think that what we have seen is that, like, I don't know too many development companies out there who are developing new products that aren't going as a cloud option. Okay. Even the big ERP providers, Dynamics and everything else like that, are cloud based. Like, so there's no, it's not that there's an excuse. Where we see that there's not cloud based is in very highly specialized industries where there's not a huge number of players in that market. Okay. That's going to lag. But that's also probably only 5% of your client base. Right, 95% is going to adopt newer technologies. And I think we've actually got a little bit of a role to show people as to what the new technologies could actually mean longer term for clients. I think that especially in those specialized fields, there is a bit of a risk trying to be the app advisor to everyone, but just know that operational reporting is becoming far, far faster, more accurate, more timely. Yeah, as we often say, right information to the right people at the right time.
Mhm.
Only way you can do that is being able to have constant access to information.
Mhm.
The easiest way to do that is with a cloud-enabled information source. It doesn't have to be in the cloud, but it's got to be cloud-enabled to able to access the information.
Did you want to? I had there the difference between Power BI and Spotlight, like where they intersect. Did you want to comment? Is there anything not particularly?
Oh, man. Look from our perspective, where we see firms using Power BI, it's the operational imperative, right? We're getting back to areas where Microsoft as a system is constantly increasing and getting access to more data sources. Okay, we've got a software program that's used by hundreds of millions of people, focused on leveraging data from hundreds of thousands of systems. One over time is just going to have access to more data more quickly, more readily than the other. So that's why we've backed the Microsoft Power Platform in there. Look, there's others that we've used. We've used Google services and everything else like that, but nothing. Number one for an accounting firm, we're Microsoft houses. Like there are huge parallels to be drawn from Excel and Power BI. Like if you've used Excel, you're not starting from ground zero in Power. Some of the interfacing's the same. DAX is basic DAX is very equivalent to Excel. So you can get started with an if statement or a sum or things like that. So that learning curve has a bit of the edge taken off it. It's also so reliable, like consistency on how information comes in, yet it's being developed with updates coming out every month. Right, there's new functionality that's being added, and look, just like anything else we use, it gets updated, and occasionally, but very occasionally, the interface gets updated. But like the rest of the Microsoft suite, those changes are subtle and to add functionality, not complete new redesigns each time. So look, I think that it provides a place of comfort in there, and just the market that's getting behind it is just massive. So we've put all our chips into the Microsoft camp nowadays. We're not developing for other systems, and I'm happy with the decision.
Yep. Last question, Dan.
Yep.
Why would you consider Power BI in your accounting firm? And I guess you've really just answered that there. This is pretty your last question.
Well,
back in Microsoft.
Well, that's essentially right. Like, Microsoft has moved from selling software licenses. Like for those of you who were in the early 2000s, Microsoft was all about what licenses could I get on this particular functionality. Nowadays, Microsoft to me, there's licenses and there's fees to be paid, but it's service first, licensing second. Like, you can get a 60-day trial of Power BI to work out how it's going to work and what you can do with it before you pay a cent, right? Which is different to the times gone by. But I still just think that because it is so familiar with other tools, how it's laid out and things like that, just makes it just takes that first step, makes the start just that little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to firms, probably the way that I start with them is always talking about what their strategy is. Okay. And what I try and do is say, hey, get your strategy right, but at the same time, take a proactive step to get started. Okay. Because good's better than perfect. Perfect never gets out the door. Okay. So what we try and say to people is, hey, if you're keen in exploring this area, number one, let's start working on a strategy. But number two, let's start exploring. Okay. So if you want to start learning this and you want to, we say to most firms, start internally with an external focus and start by setting up a trial, get into the data, but have purpose around it. Okay. Don't start a trial with Power BI or Atani or anything else like that without a problem you want to solve or a sense of purpose in there. Because all you'll do is you'll sign up for the subscription, you'll get your 14 days, whatever it is, and you come out the other side saying, I just didn't spend the time to actually look at it properly. And your journey will get delayed another 6 months, another 12 months, another 2 years. So start with purpose when you start this. Start with strategy, understand what your end game is going to be, and then schedule time to actually use. Okay. So don't think you're going to learn Power BI in 2 hours. Don't think that you're going to know everything that Atani can do in 50 minutes. Right. Know that you're going to have to do the boot camps. You're going to have to learn a little bit around it. You're going to have to find a problem. So don't start just connecting a client. Connect the client and say, I want to know this, and then work towards that goal in there. But I can't stress enough, practice makes perfect. You know, it's the only way to get to Carnegie Hall, and nothing's changed in that regard. So that's where we see most people fail in the journey before they even start, is starting without a purpose.
Very good.